Andrew Schlecht from The Athletic covers the Oklahoma City Thunder, also does the newsletter for The Athletic, I believe. Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time this morning. Welcome to Hoop City with Paul Sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, work at The Athletic, you cover the Oklahoma City Thunder, correct?
Yes, I do.
All right, so SGA, we know what a historic season he's having. Is he your MVP in your eyes?
I think when you look at the season overall, he is the MVP. Now, the Thunder have been strange this season. It's almost you have these different sections of their season. You have the 24-1 start where it felt like he's like imminently the MVP. Is this team going to challenge for, 74 wins or, what's going to happen with this team? They fall off a little bit, some of it due to injury. They lose to the Spurs 3 times, and it feels like the sky is falling. And then they've kind of rebounded over this last stretch where they had a 12-game winning streak, and they beat a lot of really good teams. I do think that when you look at the season overall, that Shea has had the best season of anybody on the best team. I think if you look at the last, 25 to 30 games, it's probably Wemby. If you look at the last 15 games, you could probably consider Luka Doncic. But if you're looking at the season in totality, I think that Shea has been consistently the best player in the league so far. So, yes, I do think that Shea is the deserving MVP.
Hey, you know what? As a Canadian, that makes me very happy to hear that he might be going back-to-back.
Yeah.
You do bring up the 24-1 start with the Thunder, though, and I think an important thing about that is that J-Dub, Jalen Williams, he was unavailable for basically that entire stretch, and then he came back, and the Thunder sort of started to struggle. Is J-Dub sort of coming back into the guy that you saw last season, or what's his effect on this OKC team that maybe makes them look a touch more human?
Yeah, so he's been back for 3 games, and when he first came back from his injury, from his wrist, he had surgery on his wrist. His wrist wasn't right yet, and he wasn't shooting threes really. His handle was not what it was. Defensively, he was still there. He's actually really progressed as a passer this season, just because he's just had to. But I would say now, with him returning, he's starting to look more like himself. He told me yesterday that he feels more like himself, that his wrist feels back 100%. He feels like he's trusting his leg a little bit more. I think perhaps, whenever he did come back, it was a pretty big adjustment for the team because he's someone that is going to take a lot of shots, going to hold a lot of possessions. But overall, without J-Dub, they're not going to win the NBA title again. And so they need to reintegrate him back into the team, slide everybody back into their other roles, and get some rhythm going into the playoffs. But I do think that when he did initially return, just the fact that he wasn't himself was a part of that, a part of their struggle. And part of it, too, is San Antonio is really, really good. And there's no shame in losing to San Antonio, even though they lost to them 3 times. There's no shame in that. That's a really good basketball team, and somebody that they're a puzzle to figure out. Wemby is really difficult to deal with. If you also go back and look at some of those Spurs games, the Spurs shot the ball really, really well, probably unsustainably well against the Thunder in those games. But I do think that overall, Dub as a versatile defender, as a secondary ball handler, as their second best scorer overall, as a guy who gets them playing faster, they just have to have him, playing at his peak if they want to repeat.
Yeah, hey, it makes a lot of sense to me. Hoop City with Paul Sir here on Sports 1440, joined by Andrew Schlecht of The Athletic, covers the Oklahoma City Thunder. You bring up going for back-to-back, going for a repeat, and the Spurs losses and everything. What do you think the one deficiency of this team could be that would cost them a second title?
I think it's their offense will go through these lulls, and it feels like they do it collectively where they just can't shoot it. We saw that a little bit in Boston. We saw it in the first half last night against Chicago. where they just can't make threes. Now, go back and look at their percentages in the playoffs last year. For the most part, they were very bad, and they have like a pretty big margin for error just because their defense is that good and Shea is that good. But I do think it's going to be shooting. They have added Jared McCain, who has been stellar since he got to the Thunder. Isaiah Joe is a much improved player and a guy who I think can stay on the floor a little bit more come playoff time as well. But I do think outside shooting will be their Achilles heel. If they don't repeat, they lose in the conference finals, they lose in the NBA finals, I think that we will look at the three-point shooting as probably the culprit there for them. Other than that, I do think that it's not only that, but it's who's taking the threes. You know, I think Boston did an amazing job the other night of making guys like Luguentz Dort and Alex Caruso be the ones to take the open threes. And sometimes Caruso will go through stretches where he hits 50% from three. He'll also go through stretches where he's hitting 15% from three. And so just the streakiness of those guys, could be the difference in another NBA title.
It's interesting that you bring up that outside shooting, because the feeling I get when I watch Thunder games is their defensive rebounding. I think when a guy like Chet, and I know Hartenstein's been in and out of the lineup a lot this year, they don't really have that guy that can really crash the boards, which is what I saw when they were losing to, or why games were so close with the Nuggets, or why they were losing to the Spurs, is because they have those bigger bodies that can sort of crash the offensive glass.
The rebounding has definitely been something that's been a problem. It's not been as big a problem this season. Hartenstein fixes a lot of that, and I actually think that Chet, and you can even back this up with some numbers, but he's been a better rebounder this season, period. Now, Chet did not play well against San Antonio, and that's something that he's got to kind of level up if they do, in fact, match up with them in the playoffs. But that used to be like their biggest problem, but I think it's been less of a problem this season.
Oh, all right. I just want to sort of go to the NBA as a whole, because big news like this week, NBA expansion, it's officially happening. Seattle and Vegas getting bids for teams. I was wondering if you think this is the right time for the NBA to expand.
Yeah, I think that inevitably they were going to. One, I think they want an influx of cash. If you could just bring in $15 billion into your business, would you say no to that? I don't think so. And the owners certainly aren't going to say no to that. They voted for it at the Board of Governors meeting. Like they all want that inflow of cash. Part of me just wonders if there's just bigger things to solve for the NBA rather than adding more teams to it. I do think that clearly, like the biggest thing for the NBA right now is just making money, which has always kind of been the thing with this league. But if it were me, I would be trying to solve the problem of like they play too many games, or maybe even you adjust the minutes of the games, because I just think like the product itself would be so much better if there were less games. And I wish that they would take a look at that. I know because this has to do with money, and the reason that they wouldn't go less games is because it would take money out of people's pockets. But to me, like the overall product could be better if there were less games. As far as like timing for expansion, it's probably fine. These teams are going to be really bad though. And I think, if you're a Western Conference team, you actually might be excited about that, because you're going to add two bottom of the barrel teams to the Western Conference, and you're probably going to boot the Minnesota Timberwolves to the East. So I do think that teams will like that. But we'll see. I do think that there's enough talent in the league, but is it going to be spread evenly? No. We look at a team like the Brooklyn Nets right now, and there's just not much there for that team. And these expansion teams could look worse than that. And so I'll be really, really curious to see like how long it takes these teams to get on their feet. Because like you look at the Bobcats, who were like one of the last expansion teams, that team never really got it together. Like, that version of the team, it took them so long to get their footing. And some of it's going to be who's the owner, who did they select for the general manager. All of that's really going to matter. But, I think people could actually look at, after the expansion happens and you look a year down the road and it's like, why did we do this? I think that those think pieces can write themselves today.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I was wondering, do you have an idea of who might be the best player that's available in these expansion drafts? Like, do the Memphis Grizzlies use this as a way to maybe get out of the Ja Morant business or anything like that?
Yeah, that would be really interesting. There's a lot of players, so we have to think about it in this will happen in 2028. So I think Ja Morant will need a new contract by then. You look at the guys for the Sacramento Kings, they're going to need, those guys will either be off their current deals or need contract extension, so they won't be eligible really for it. Joel Embiid is one where if they left him unprotected, would an expansion team take him on? I mean, I think the answer would probably be no. As far as the best player, I would probably look at who are the teams that are the most stacked, because if you look back at 2004 when the Bobcats did their expansion draft, the best player they selected was Gerald Wallace. And Gerald was on the Sacramento Kings, who had a really, really deep roster at the time. That was a really good Kings team. And I would look at the Thunder. I would look at San Antonio. Not only do you have their current rosters, but the Thunder have, 2 draft picks in this next draft. They're going to have, good players available. So it's probably going to be one of those guys like Nikola Topic. I don't know if they would leave him unprotected. But I would say he could be a guy that's left unprotected just because the Thunder don't have a ton of information about him. You could look at even a Jared McCain or somebody like that if the Thunder don't give him an extension. So it would probably be somebody like that. I'm not necessarily suggesting that those guys will be unprotected, but it'll be a player like that where it's the super stacked teams that need to keep their core together or need to keep their rotation intact, and they're going to have to leave somebody with potential, kind of like the Gerald Wallace piece off of there. So that would be my guess as to what that will look like. But it's still, it's a couple years down the road, and the league changes so fast that it's just really hard to predict.
No, absolutely. All right, this is the last one for you, Andrew. I just want to know, there's a lot of discourse with this year, particularly after the injury to Cade Cunningham with a collapsed lung, where you fall on the 65-game rule to be eligible for awards in the NBA.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this coin. I think some people, obviously you can look at the Cade Cunningham piece of it and be like, man, this sucks. Why would we do this? But also look at Jokic and Wemby, who are playing a lot of basketball right now, 2 of the best players in the NBA, who, if this rule didn't exist, we would not be seeing this much Victor Wembanyama right now. Yeah. We would not be seeing this much Nikola Jokic. So there's certainly an element to hey, this is working. We are actually seeing more of these guys than we would have previously. It's just a shame that this happened to Cade. Now, any sort of rule like this is going to have unintended consequences that are going to be bad for somebody. And this year it happens to be Cade. It would be somebody else if it wasn't Cade. I think overall what they set out to accomplish is working. I think players are trying to play as much as they can. There's always unfortunate things that happen in the league, with players like what happened with Cade.
Yep.
And you'd like to see them maybe make an exception for Cade to make an All-NBA team. Maybe one thing they could do is keep the 65-game rule, but you can't make the first team All-NBA. Maybe you could make second team All-NBA, which would still, get a lot of guys to their contract qualifiers. And lucky for Cade, he has his contract extension. He's not, this isn't going to affect his bottom dollar, which is really good, but it will affect reward stuff. And it's just, kind of the unfortunate nature of it. And I think maybe you tweak it, but overall, I would say like the 65 game rule has worked for the most part. Like it's getting guys on the court more.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think even someone that was really the main driving force behind implementing this rule was Kawhi Leonard, and he's playing unreal basketball down the stretch right now, and a lot of basketball as well, and that's really, really fun to watch.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Thanks so much for cutting some time out. This was great.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the games.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye.